break this down, talk to Dr. Amesh Adalja about it, who's here with us in our studio from Johns Hopkins. We've talked to you a number of times throughout the pandemic, and it's good to have you back here to talk, I guess, afterwards. I don't think Marjorie Taylor Greene's a serious person on this issue or any other issue. But that aside, is it worthwhile to go through a process like this with other members of Congress? Because hindsight's always 20/20, but now you go back and say, hey, what did we get right? What did we get wrong? I mean, do you think about that yourself sometimes? Or?
Definitely. I think it is very valuable to have a sober accounting of what decisions were right, what decisions were wrong, where we can do better, because this isn't going to be the last pandemic we face. And we want to make sure that all of our systems are optimized. And these types of hearings can do that, but not in the manner that they're conducted, where it's basically performative theater. But there is a way to get it right so we don't have all of the loss of life, all of those businesses closed, all those kids out of school.
Right. So, you know, like the 6-foot distancing. Okay, so let me play that clip, see if we can get something constructive out of that. What Fauci said, you know, the fact of the matter is, when we were having those conversations in 2020, there was a lot, even the experts like you didn't know, and we're trying to do the best that we could with limited information. Here's what Fauci said about the 6-foot rule that was implemented.
The CDC was responsible for those kinds of guidelines for schools, not me. So when I said that it just appeared, it appeared. Was there any science behind it? What I meant by no science behind it is that there wasn't a controlled trial that said compare 6 foot with 3 feet with 10 feet. So there wasn't that scientific evaluation of it.
So is that something we might do differently next time around, or have we learned something? What do you say?
Well, I think it's definitely the case that we're going to have guidance that we have to issue to the general public, and we have to be clear about what evidence supports it, where we're making extrapolations from historical data. All of that would be very important. Sometimes in kind of the fog of war during a pandemic, a lot of that gets kind of short shrift, and people don't understand why those decisions are being made or what the rationale behind them is. And I think that transparency is going to be necessary, and I think people have learned, the CDC, the NIH, about making sure that the public understands what's behind these recommendations and how they might change, what questions we don't know the answers to, and how we're going to find those answers out. But I think kind of demonizing all of this isn't very productive, and it gets us nowhere towards being more resilient to the next pandemic.
How important is it that we know about the origins? Obviously, China has not been that open about what they may or may not know about that. We've known that for some time, I think. But there was a back and forth politically in this country. Some people would take sides when they would come up with the idea that it may have leaked out of a lab. You had a lot of people saying, you know, dismissing that out of hand at the beginning, and then they came around, well, maybe that is the case. So Fauci was asked about that today, whether he had, you know, called that a conspiracy theory, and here's how he put it.
I don't think the concept of there being a lab leak is inherently a conspiracy theory. What is conspiracy is the kind of distortions of that particular subject, like it was a lab leak and I was parachuted into the CIA like Jason Bourne and told the CIA that they should really not be talking about a lab leak.
Thank you.
That's the conspiracy.
Appreciate.
All right, so he says that kind of stuff is nonsense, but what about the origins of COVID?
I do think the origin is an active investigation that we want to figure out. We want to know whether this came from an animal and what that animal might be, because that will change our interactions with that animal, or if this came from a lab, because we want to understand the biosafety lapses that might have led to it. So this is something that we want to understand, but I think it's very hard to do that without China being more transparent, because they're the ultimate ones that will actually have the information necessary to determine the origin definitively.
How's your thinking on that issue evolved, or has it?
I think it's always been an open hypothesis. There's evidence on both sides here in terms of evidence for an animal spillover that occurred and the role of the seafood market and wet markets. And then there's also a lot of kind of shady dealings that happen at the Wuhan Institute of Virology, where we don't quite understand what went on there and what involvement the Chinese government had. So I think that there's still questions that need to be answered. But I think that from the Wuhan Institute of Virology, the lab leak hypothesis, that can only be answered by the Chinese government, and they need to be more transparent, because we're going to face these problems, and we want to do research in a safe manner because we need to study these viruses.
Now, speaking of— Thanks so much for watching. Just go to joinnn.com to find News Nation on your television provider. And don't forget to click the red subscribe button below to get more of News Nation's fact-driven, unbiased coverage.